Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. And this video is obviously a little different. You know, we got some gameplay in the background and it's kind of just me talking about a subject. And in this one, we're just going to be talking about the history of my drug use. So yeah, let's hop into it. So, if you want to get technical, the first time I ever ingested any substance recreationally was when I was 3 years old. Now, did I know that that's what I was doing? No. Did a family member just hand me a can of beer? Yes. But, you know, I just like to look back on that because it's very indicative of my future experiences, you know. But it all really started when I was, 8 years old, and I got into my parents' liquor cabinet. And, alcohol was the first substance I had ever used, which is funny to me because I just don't like alcohol anymore, like hardly at all. Like, it's fine, but not a huge fan. But after that, I, of course, wanted to try other things, and the first thing that I tried after alcohol was weed, and that was in the summer between 5th and 6th grade. I was 10 years old, and a family member's friend had dropped like a doob tube with two containers, or it was a doob tube with two joints in it, and it fell into the couch. And me being a nosy little kid that I was like, I wonder what I would be looking in the couches all the time because, I'm always jugging and finessing, you feel me? So I go in there and I find these two doinks and I'm like, all right, it's go time. I knew what they were right away. Of course, I knew what weed was. I knew a lot about what weed was, but I remember that was the first time where I was like, okay, this is something that I like. You know what I mean? Like, substances in general. Because, I have two substances under my belt, and I was like, they're different. I can use them for different things, all da-da-da-da-da. And from there, it was mostly weed. Up until, like, middle school. So, like, 7th grade, I started getting interested in other things, and the first thing I got into was Xanax. Lean was what I had tried before Xanax. I said Xanax, but I didn't necessarily want to talk about the lean because I can't really give too many details, but I had tried it, but I had used it in a party setting, we'll call it, multiple times before this. And so, I learned a little bit. I heard about Xanax a little bit, and I was like, yeah, I want to get into that. You know what I mean? I was like, I need to try that. So I remember buying 2 bars. Me and Scrape were excited because we were supposed to do them together or whatever. And of course, me being the type of person I am, tried a piece of a bar and was like, Jesus Christ, I love these. And I kept both of them and just told him, you wouldn't like these, basically. And that was what kicked off my worst addiction, which was Xanax. I mean, like, my Coke addiction and my Percocet addiction were bad, but I think my Xanax use was probably the worst. And it got really, really bad compared to my Coke and Xanax use, or my Coke and opioid use. But at this time, I was like, that was like the only time I had used bars, and it pretty much stuck to weed decently throughout that time. I had sort of started getting into psychedelics, learning about them a little bit, but I hadn't used any of them yet. And pretty much it was just weed and the occasional lean. But in 8th grade, I was homeschooled because I fucking hated the school I was going to. I begged to be homeschooled because I hated school. And I was like, homeschool would be easy. You know what I mean? It wasn't. I hated that shit. And that's when my drug use got really, really bad. My self-harm as well, because it's all addiction. Like, self-harm is another one of my vices. Food is another one of my vices. I had already been abusing food like my entire life. Through 8th grade, I was just, smoking weed here and there whenever I could get it. And, pretty much just self-harm were the only two vices of mine that I was really able to use. But, high school was really when my drug use fully kicked off. 9th grade was when I started smoking weed every day. Before that, I would be, pretty common, every, like, on the weekends, sometimes on Wednesday, somebody will have weed and we'll sneak out at lunch. That was kind of like how it was before that. But here in 9th grade, I started having money, and I was able to buy weed, and I was smoking a lot of weed by myself. I was smoking weed pretty much all the time. This was where I had done psychedelics for the first time too. I had done mushrooms for the first time in 9th grade, and this was when that mushroom trip really changed my whole perspective on drugs, because I used the mushrooms to just get high, you know what I mean? And they, I didn't treat the psilocybin nice, so it didn't treat me very nice at all. Had an awful trip, and it kind of scared me off of psychedelics for a while. And so sophomore year, as you guys know, was probably like the peak of my probably peak of my use, and especially the peak of my poly use, because I was using predominantly Percocet, but pretty much any opiate I could get my hand on. Eventually, I threw in some psychedelic experiences here, a little bit of ketamine. In junior year, I was kind of messing around a little bit, but this is when I had my first DMT experience, and it shook me to my fucking core. Like, it's way too complicated to get into, and I'm definitely going to have a story on the channel. But just know, if you've done DMT or know anything about DMT, then I fucking shook myself to the core with it. Junior year, I started getting into psychedelics, and once I started, this was when I had done acid for the first time. I had done DMT, and then it was kind of a muddled year. My junior year was muddled. There was a lot of shit going on. I didn't have a whole lot of time to really do a lot, but and I was using mostly Xanax and Percocet still. Quarantine happened during my senior year, and I spent a lot of time at home, a lot of time with myself, a lot of time thinking, and a lot doing more psychedelics and feeling pretty good, right? Then something happened. I don't know what it was. I was doing decent for a while, but my brain just switched, and the drug use got really bad. And for about 6 months, I was so high on Xanax that I didn't even realize I was high. Like, to the point where I didn't feel like I would take upwards of 11 to 12 per day. And at the end of that 6 months, my mom passed away, and that fucked me up so bad, because the amount of guilt I held in my heart, that I still hold, you know what I mean? I will always be guilty about that shit. There's not shit I can do about becoming unguilty about it, and I think I should be guilty about it. You know what I mean? But I spent the last 6 months of my mom's life not even remembering any conversations we had, not remembering any of the time we spent together, not remembering things that she said to me that were important, you know what I mean? Like, all of that shit. And you know, for a while I was alright. I was like, alright, I can't do this. I can't do this. You know what I mean? I'm gonna wean myself off. I'm gonna try to get sober, blah, 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 blah. But then it only got worse. My drug use really amped up here because I didn't know how to cope. Like, I was fucked. Like, straight up. I was fucked. I didn't even realize it, you know what I mean? But I was fucked. And so I was taking about 20 to 30 bars a day. So this is when I started taking like 20 to 30 bars per day. And I was just straight up blacked out for at least a month and a half. And then, you know, there was a specific 13-day period, the last 13 days of this, which I consider still the worst 13 days of my life. So I had started messing around with this girl, right, who I had already turned down once before, who, for a myriad of reasons, which was the right thing to do, which was the only thing that you should do when approached by this girl. So we went on this huge Zam binge together, and I pretty much almost killed her, like, straight up. Like, it was bad. And so simultaneously to this happening, Scrape was going through his own version of this, right? He was abusing Dex, he was drinking a lot, he was doing blow, blah blah blah, whatever. I'll let him tell that eventually. So since Scrape was going through the same thing, he was about ready to pull the plug on his addiction a little bit, you know what I mean? Like, his idea was, you know, he wanted one last big hurrah before you know, trying to clean himself up. But, you know, this last hurrah turned into him going to the psych ward, me losing about $4,000, just a large amount of fuckery, right? A whole lot of shit went super fucking south, and then there was a bunch of shit that was going on with me that I had to deal with that I straight up just can't talk about on YouTube. And so the homie goes to the psych ward, right? And one of my other friends just so happened to have acid around this time. And I was like, fuck it, I want some acid. You know what I mean? And I'm coming off of Xanax. I'm hating myself, just feeling awful, right? So the night I get this acid, I find out that the homie gets out the ward. And I'm like, oh shit, let's go. And so we both get online that night, and he has Dex, and I have acid. And I think both of us on this night is when we decided to like try to do something with ourselves in some kind of way. I think because like since this point I've noticed a huge change in him, and this was when I started working out again. This was when I really started caring about myself. I started eating better. I stopped putting awful shit in my body, and you know, I'm saying that while smoking a cigarette. You know, I'm still working on it, but now I've been using psychs kind of frequently, you know, ritualistically, and I've been really working on myself. You know what I mean? I've lost 60 pounds naturally through exercise and diet. I've improved my cognition, at least in my opinion, and there's just a lot of things that are going well in my life right now, and I owe them pretty much all to psychedelics. So yeah, that's pretty much up to date with my drug use. Like, that's the story of like pretty much all of my drug use. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. Whole lot of cool stuff coming on the way. Check out the Patreon in the description below. Drop a like, sub if you'd like. Yeah guys, I'll see y'all later. Deuces.